EM Weekly starting right now, bringing emergency managers from around the world together to learn, share and collaborate.
Good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you are at. And it's a beautiful, beautiful fall morning here in Southern California. It's 55 degrees out. That's why I got a sweater on. But today I am wearing, if you can see it, the Navy sweater. And the reason why I'm wearing the Navy sweater is because yesterday technically was our birthday, the Navy's birthday. So Sean Griffin, I know you're out there listening. 1775 is when our Navy came alive. And so we're celebrating that this week. And so if you are out there, any of my fellow sailors and Marines, Semper Fi, do or die, and go Navy. All right. So, but that being said, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about information sharing, collaboration, and why it's important, and how we can make this better for everybody across the board. And so today, I'm really happy to have an expert in that field. And Rachel, come on in.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. So, information sharing and collaboration, that's kind of like your area of expertise, I guess, and that's why we got you here. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, my real focus on my research is disaster studies. So it's risk analysis related to natural disasters, but all of my research really is marked by collaborations both across disciplines and between academics and practitioners, like emergency managers. So I think that's probably what you're, what I'm excited to talk about today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and in terms of like practitioners versus academics, I think the reason I love this is most of the academics I know, the researchers that I know, and myself included, we've gotten into the area of studying disasters, not just as an intellectual exercise, but because we want to make a difference. We want some of our work to get into the real world and to have an impact and to help solve these challenges that we have. So I think there's always a real interest in working with practitioners who bring a different perspective, who can kind of ground us in some of the reality of what they're facing, of what would really, what the challenges really are. And I think our strengths complement each other because as researchers, we kind of have the luxury of having time to really sit and think about the way things are done and to think about, could we do it differently? When you're dealing with the next event, you don't have time as an emergency manager to do that always. You got to just deal with whatever's in front of you. So I think there's some complementary strengths that that we can bring if we work together.
I mean, I have my feet in both worlds, right? One is a practitioner on the other side of it, as I teach, as most people know. And one of the struggles that I see is we have practitioners that I don't want to say are dismissive of the stuff that we're learning, through research, but are very suspect of what we're doing in research. How do we bridge that gap?
Yeah, I totally understand that because there's definitely a danger when you're in a university or some kind of research environment to get disconnected from kind of the real world. It's the idea of the ivory tower. And so it is, I can definitely see how it happens that, we start down a path of something that we think is interesting, but it's not necessarily going to be directly useful, or at least not in the near term. We make certain assumptions for reasons like it's easier to do it that way, or we know how to do it. And those assumptions might make whatever work we're doing not ultimately useful. So I totally understand that. But I think the way to overcome it is just to be talking to each other a lot more, and through the entire cycle of projects. So from formulating the projects, which questions should we be focused on, through how should we go about it, and how do we interpret and make sense of what we've developed or behave, or learned. I think through the whole process, we need to be talking together. And so, like I said, I think it's, it requires some willingness on both sides and some interest on both sides to value the opinions of others, to value the perspective they bring and the strengths that they bring, and try to explain what you think you bring. So I think they're very complementary. I think we can come up with much better solutions together than either would alone.
Right. One of the things I find interesting too is when I say we, I'm talking about practitioner side of it, is there's a lot of great research that's going on out there. And we have the journals, right? We have the Journal of Emergency Management, we have the Crisis Response Journal, and they're out there, and people are putting out some really great pieces of information, great work. But on the other end of it, it does take some effort as a practitioner to look at these things and to find them and to search them out. And so kind of putting the screws to the practitioners right now, but there is effort there, right? But you have to do it, because if you're not keeping up with what is happening out there, I think you're actually doing a disservice to your community, and you're definitely doing a disservice to the profession. And I want to talk a little bit more about the profession here a little bit, but I know that where you're at the university, you have a few different research wings. How do people access that information?
So I'm part of the Disaster Research Center at the University of Delaware, and we do have a full resource collection that's really wonderful, with a full-time manager of that resource collection who's available to, excuse me, to help people access that information from all over the world. So if you look for our website, you'll see the resource collection, and it's all available. And in fact, she's willing and eager to help people find what they need to find. So it's a great resource, and people from all over the world do access it. I will say, though, to your question or your previous comment, that it isn't as simple as to do this collaboration as I think sometimes we want to believe. And I think that's maybe what you were getting at, that there is often kind of a gap between where a researcher sees their work ending and where a practitioner would like it to begin. So, what researchers are rewarded for, what we're funded to do, is to advance knowledge and to develop new things. It's not really to bring tools to the beta tested version that you can easily sit on your desk and use. So there is kind of a gap. And recently I've been working with a startup company, Disaster Technologies. I know you know them, Todd. And they're trying to help fill that gap, to take some of the research that's been developed and try to get it over that hurdle into a form that's easier for people to use. There's other ways to do that as well. That's one company that's trying to. But yeah, so I think a lot of it also can be about managing the expectations, because if a practitioner is expecting a nice, like, perfectly tested tool with full tech support by the end of a project, and the academic is thinking that we're never going to get to that point, then there can be miscommunication, and then trust issues develop and stuff like that. So part of it is being clear about expectations. But I think there is an opportunity to make it easier to make this connection. I know the National Science Foundation recently funded a project called the Civic program that was aimed at that as well. And I hope that there are more coming out, because it's not trivial. But I know that, at least among the researchers I know, I think there's a lot of interest in doing that.
Yeah, I just had a conversation on another show I have called Prepare, Respond, Recover, and we were talking to DHS specifically about their two challenges that they have. One on the civic side, the other one is on climate change, and looking for researchers to go and find those tools that we have. And I think that's the interesting part about it. And this is sort of that gap that we have to fill, is that when you have organizations that are out there doing great research, and then you have people that do prize. I mean, you can win. I think it was like $50,000 or $60,000 or something like that they're giving out for workable solutions for climate change, protections that are out there. Those type of things really impact how we do the job on the practitioner side. My concern is that I think the practitioners get so caught up in the minutia of their specific jurisdiction that they're not looking at best ways and best practice. I mean, they not because they don't want to, but because I think they just get caught up in the day-to-day work of stuff, of seeing other ways of doing things and looking at disasters worldwide and learning from those responses and those recoveries, and not being able to implement them into their jurisdiction. And I think that's another gap that we have to do. And now, when you're looking for collaboration, how do you find partners to collaborate with?
Well, usually it's we're thinking about a project that we think would be useful, and then are trying to identify people who might have a good, might be able to contribute. I've done a lot of work over the years in North Carolina related to hurricanes, and I met Mike Sprayberry, who was the state emergency manager there until just recently when he retired. I actually met him like way long ago before he was in that role, and so we sort of developed a relationship and a level of trust over time. So when new ideas came up, he was a great person both to collaborate with and to introduce me to other people who might be interested. So I know that emergency managers have a very strong network, and so talking to some people, you can usually get connected to others. I've also done a lot of work in the Los Angeles area related to earthquakes. But I think it's really just talking to people and seeing who's interested, because usually it takes some effort and some commitment, and so you can't force somebody to do it if they're not interested.
Absolutely. Hey, I want to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about the importance of going to or to go in like the IAM. That's what's happening this week. Hey, are you going to go to IAM on Monday? Well, hey, okay, if you're there, visit booth 816 to learn more about the powerful technology behind Disaster Tech's DICE and receive demonstrations of Voltron, a game-changing preparedness platform by Microsoft and Disaster Tech. In addition, attendees will have the ability to enter giveaways, and happy hour bracelets will be distributed. In addition to Disaster Tech's booth presence, Disaster Tech CEO and co-founder Sean Griffin will be participating in a speaker session about designing and conducting exercises to evaluate emergency management. During this talk, Disaster Tech and co-speakers from Microsoft will discuss this topic at length and give further demonstrations of Voltron. Join us on Tuesday, October 19th from 2:30 to 3 p.m. in Ballroom C. Lastly, on 10/19 from 6:45 to 8:45 p.m., don't miss out on attending Disaster Tech's happy hour at the Atwater Brewery. Food and beverages will be supplied, and giveaway winners will be selected. Don't miss out on this exclusive chance to see Voltron in action. See you at IAM. Hey, real quick, also, just there was a change on that. That's not Ballroom C any longer. It will be in Ballroom D if you're in the area. I'm also speaking on Monday as well at the IAM conference, so I'm looking forward to that. And however, we also have NDEM coming up, the Natural Disaster and Emergency Management Expo. It's going to be in New York City on the November 17th to the 18th at the Javits Center. And so registration is now live for that. So please join us over there. And if you can't make it live for whatever reason, the keynote speech that was going to be going on with myself, Craig Fugate, and Pete Gaynor, we're also going to stream that. So please look for the information. We'll have it in the show notes for you to be able to watch the streaming event, the live streaming event with those guys. It's going to be a great conversation about emergency management from the top and talk about collaboration. So Rachel, come back in. So are you going to be going to IAM?
I'm not going to be able to go this year. I was fortunate to present in one of the early webinars, like the pre-meeting webinars, with the folks from Disaster Tech and some other collaborators. So that was great. But I won't be able to attend in person this coming week.
How important is it to really go to these events? I know people like to go to the conferences and stuff like this, but why is it important to go to these conferences and learn from each other?
You mean as an academic or as a
both, just in general?
Yeah. I mean, I think sharing ideas is really important. It's important in any field, but in particular for disaster studies and and emergency management, any one person or jurisdiction has only had a limited number of experiences. I mean, almost by definition, they're infrequent. So, so learning from other people who have had similar experiences is really critical, and that's why it's really an international field, because the big events, especially, don't happen that often. So we have to learn from other people. It's one of the challenges, though, because we have to figure out what aspects of a particular event are generalizable, or what lessons can be translated to your own jurisdiction from other events. But I think, that's a critical part of this whole field is, learning from the experiences of others. So that's I think attending conferences is one way to do that. Collaborating on projects is another way. Reading the literature is another way. Listening to this podcast is another way.
I don't know how much experience you have with after action reports or reviews, if you will. But I mean, for every disaster, every event that's out there, we do with them, and I think they're very important. Do you suggest that emergency managers, like especially for the big disasters, read those after action reports to get what happened and what mistakes were made and how we can not have those mistakes again?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we have to, I mean, for the same reasons, we have to really try to learn from each event. There's some things we've learned over and over again, but also the world is always changing. So there's always new things and there's new events. We're learning how cell phones play a role in disasters now. That wasn't something we had in previous events. So, but part of it, like I said, is trying to figure out what lessons can be translated to a new event. There's also kind of a natural way our brains work, is that we tend to anchor on our last experience or our most salient experience. So if you assume that, I'll use LA as an example because you're there. If you assume the next earthquake is going to be exactly like the 1994 Northridge earthquake, you might be surprised when it's not. It might be very different. And so only relying on your own experience or the experience of your agency, even, if you say, well, in the Northridge earthquake, this happened and it was fine, or, this was a problem. That's great information, of course. But only by looking at other parts of the world and and looking at the literature and the research and stuff, you can sort of understand how typical was that event. What do we expect to be similar or different in the next one, so that, you're not always planning for the last one.
Right. We do plan for the last one. There's two quotes I'm going to probably butcher really quick one, but one is, we're always fighting the last battle. And then the other one too is, Eisenhower, he said, basically, please, those that know the quote by heart, please don't kill me for this. He basically said, it's not the plan that counts, it's the process, right? So
Right.
The plan that we actually sit down and do and write and put in a piece of paper, that's not the important thing. Well, it is important, but the process of going through, thinking those things through,
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of leads into my next question regarding collaboration. I mean, the stuff that we do, and I think maybe this is one of those bridge building moments, right? That where we, as academics, we go through and we look at these things. I mean, I look over to my left here because I have a bookshelf over there. Daniel Ulrich and his writings that he has been amazing. If you guys don't know who Daniel Ulrich is, he's done some really great work on resiliency. He did a book called Black Wave, looking at the triple disaster over in Japan and some of the recovery issues that they had over there, their response issues too, for that matter. Taking those and then really putting them into practice, where exercises and drilling that research that has been done to see what we could do to do better. I think that's one of those things that we could do as practitioners. But again, it's really important to go out and find that research. And sometimes I think that as academics, we sort of stay in this bubble. What's one way that we could do better on the academic side to reach out to the practitioners and collaborate with them?
Yeah, I think it's Like I said before, I think it's really important that we reach out at the beginning of projects, not just at the end. So we don't, do a whole project, develop some tool or answer some question, and then look for someone to tell it to or to share it with, because we might we might be answering the wrong question. We might have made assumptions along the way that aren't really realistic. So I think it's incumbent upon us as researchers to get practitioners involved right from the start, to say, like, this is what we're thinking of doing, and really to integrate their input and, value it and take it seriously. If someone's saying, this is really the issue that's important, or that's not an issue, like, we have to take that into account, take it seriously. So it shouldn't be a superficial thing where you just add someone's name to a project but don't actually listen to them. So I think that's probably the most important thing. But it's, again, there has to be a willingness and a respect in both directions to listen to other people. But and then yeah, so I think doing it early, developing the trust, and really working together. Then also being willing to say, like, okay, this is probably not how I would have done it, but I'm gonna take your word for it, and I'm going to take your opinion on this, and and actually do it a different way.
What's your favorite piece of research that you've done?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Depends on the day. So, well, there's different things I like about different pieces of research, I guess. One thing that comes to mind right now is actually the work that I've been doing with disaster tech, where I'm part of a team that includes, it's very interdisciplinary. So we have a meteorologist, a hydrologist, coastal oceanographer, sociologist, and a couple engineers, and we all work together to develop a new tool to help emergency managers decide when and where to issue evacuation orders for hurricanes. And we took a very different approach that I think was really novel compared to other work in the literature. So I was really excited about it. And now we're trying to work with disaster tech and with other emergency managers to see if we can get it across that gap I talked about and into actual practice. Because I do think it could be useful. It's a little bit of a different way of thinking to what we've been used to in the past. But I think it could potentially be very helpful. And obviously it's an important real world problem. So
Right.
That's one. Yeah.
Is that part of the DICE program that disaster tech is?
We're trying to integrate it into their platform. So the National Science Foundation funded the research, and honestly, it developed over probably 10 years. It was a long time to do different pieces. But it's sort of at what we call the research tool stage now. So it works. We run it for lots of different events, but like, you need to be an engineering graduate student to know how to run it right now. So we've been working with disaster tech to put it on their platform, to develop a user interface, and to try to make sure that the information is presented in a way that's easy to understand, difficult to misunderstand, and see how it might fit into the actual workflow that an emergency manager goes through when they're dealing with a hurricane event. Like, we realize that there are all these potential barriers, that you have a normal way of doing business, a way you make decisions, and you need the right information at the right time. So we're trying to work, to identify and work through some of those more practical barriers now that we've gotten the science to a point that we really feel okay about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a public policy guy, so you probably wouldn't want me on that engineering, because I'd probably break it. So that's kind of what we do. Dan Scott has a question. It says, how do you engage with all the parties involved, and how engaged should we continue to be?
Well, that's a great question. I try to always be respectful of collaborators' time. Everybody I know is busy. And so I think, like I said, I think it's important for parties to be engaged throughout a project, not just at the end or just at the beginning. But
Right.
I try to really make sure that we're only taking people's time when it really is valuable, and they can see that, because otherwise they'll stop. They'll stop participating, and I would do the same. It's, you know, it's understandable. So normally now we've been doing, you know, our team is, the researchers and the practitioners are all over the place in different states. So, you know, we do Zoom meetings mostly. Before COVID, we used to have a meeting like in person once a year for that particular project, and for other projects as well. We usually try to have like an in-person meeting so that we can get to know each other a little bit and develop that trust, and then follow up with video meetings, and, you know, emails to send drafts back and forth and that kind of thing. It can depend on the project too. If there's an actual, you know, there might be a period during the project or a particular task that requires more input from one group than from another. So, you know, I mean, another challenge is that researchers tend to work on a long timeline.
Right.
We don't do anything that quickly. So that's another interesting barrier we've encountered. And we know, like, you know, a lot of our emergency manager partners are less available during hurricane season, during peak hurricane season, or they may plan for a meeting and then become unavailable on short notice.
Very quickly, yeah.
Right. So, you know, obviously we just have to work around that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. When I was working in government, I thought that was slow. And then I moved to academia, and I was like, holy smoke, that's makes government look like a cheetah compared to the way we do things at the.
Oh, how that hurts.
No, it's good.
I'm not denying it though.
It is funny, but it's okay. You know, you kind of get used to it. I know Dan's struggling with some of that stuff right now. Dan and I work together on the ethics project that we're working on. So, you know, not as cool as the engineering side of things, but you know, still doing some research and whatnot. I have a question, and it's not necessarily on topic. It's about academics in general, and I've seen some conversations going back and forth, you know, on the great Facebook, right, or Twitter or whatnot. And it's from emergency managers, which is really kind of concerning. And they're really kind of pushing back on the idea of having formal education for emergency management, because, you know, there's a lot of people that are in this field that, you know, were a first responder first or did something else, do not have any formal, they've never maybe, you know, taken, when I say formal education, I'm talking about college courses, have college underneath them, or at least not a degree. And there's pushback on there saying, we don't need a degree to do this job. I really disagree with them, with the way new technologies, new thought processes are coming across. Well, shoot like a quick argument of why you think that emergency managers should attend formal education.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of reasons. I mean, emergency managers have a very difficult job, and it's requires some really complex thinking and management. And so I think any kind of education to help improve just our critical thinking and management and those sort of base level skills is really important. There's more and more technology available, so it's great to have some understanding of that. But there's also you know, decades now of disaster studies that have come out, and there's a lot that we've learned, and there's no reason for every individual emergency manager to reinvent the wheel and relearn all of these things. So I think there could be real value to understanding kind of the history of how different practices came to be, understanding kind of the big picture of what's happened in the past, what we've learned from the past, you know, what we know about people's behavior, about behavior of hurricanes or earthquakes or whatever the events, you know, the hazards are. It's just a very rich and complex topic. So I think having the benefit of understanding what's been done in the past, what's happened in the past, could be very valuable.
No, absolutely, I agree with you. I can't agree with you more than that. And you know, I stress this a lot, but, you know, people go, oh, well, yeah, because you teach. And I'm like, well, it's not about
Right.
that. One of the reasons why I like to teach is because I want to bring that next generation of emergency managers up, you know, and leaning forward to the future. And I think that you're going to start seeing more and more of that. Hey, we're coming close to the end of the show. I'd like to, how could somebody find you and find the research that you're working on?
So I'm at the University of Delaware and at the Disaster Research Center. So if you Google that and Google my name, you'll find me pretty easily. And, I really would love to hear from any emergency managers listening to this. We're always looking for collaborators, me and my colleagues, or if you're looking for information that you think might be available within academic circles, I'm happy to try to connect you. Like emergency managers, I think on the academic side, there's a fairly tight network across the country and even the world. I would love to hear from you and either to talk with you or work with you myself, or to connect you to some of my colleagues at UD or at other universities.
Thank you very much. Hey, everybody. Also, her information is going to be down in the show notes. So if you guys are looking, you can go down there and click. If you're driving down the road and your pencil's not sharp, you can always just click on the link that's there in the show notes. Hey, one last thing. John Fontaine says, hey, visit Disaster Tech at booth 816 and grab a happy hour wristband and say hi to the team. Sean Michael Griffin will be speaking on 10/9 in Ballroom D at 2:30. So just don't forget about that as well. Well, I know that you're not going to be at IEM, but it was going to be great to see you at some point. Hey, everybody else, if you guys are going to be there at IEM, I'm going to be there. Looking forward to seeing everybody. Come find me. I'll be walking around the floor and whatnot, and maybe we can meet up. I could buy you a coffee or a soda or something. And, other than that, hopefully things are going great. Hey, listen, thank you so much for spending time with me this morning. And, and realistically, follow us on Facebook. If you can, we have a great group over there. We just started doing the top 10 books that belong on an emergency manager's bookshelf back there, right? So if you have a book that you think needs to be on that bookshelf, and realistically read, right, by the emergency managers, please go to Facebook and vote, right? Join the group. Love to see you over there. And until then, stay safe and stay hydrated.